So we have a lot of news and updates coming out of the Supreme Court in the recent order list and what they're now going to do with some of these rifle magazine ban cases and some of these other cases that were pending. So let's talk about what just happened this week. Now, really quick before we jump into this video, I want to ask you all for a huge favor. Looking at some of my analytics, about 60% of all my viewers are not subscribed to the channel. Now, I'm not asking you guys to do anything that you don't want to do, but a lot of people just simply aren't aware that they, haven't subscribed to the channel. They think that they are, or they've been unsubscribed by YouTube. So just double check to make sure you're still subscribed if you want to be subscribed. And then also if you just want to support the channel for free, that's one of the ways you can do that. But regardless, thank you to everybody who watches the channel, who likes, subscribes, and supports this channel. I cannot thank you guys enough for all of your support. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be talking about some updates with the multiple cases that were pending in front of the Supreme Court, which have to do with the state of Illinois and their ban on rifles and magazines. Of course, these cases are very important, not just for the state of Illinois, but other states like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, California, Oregon, Washington, and a bunch of other states. I know I probably forgot some states, but various states that have in place various rifle bans and magazine bans. These Illinois cases are going to be critical for what happens going forward in all those cases. We also had a bunch of other cases pending in front of the Supreme Court, like the Antonyuk case, which deals with the state of New York's Concealed Carry Improvement Act, and that's the concealed carry laws that they passed just 8 days after the Supreme Court issued the Bruen decision. And then also we had some news in some, Cargill bump stock cases, some reactions to that. And so those are going to be the easiest ones to address first. What ended up happening this week is we had some cases that went to the Supreme Court last week for conference. Those were the Guidez case and the Hardin case. We got the order list this week, this Monday. And in the Guidez case, that one was GVR'd, which means it was granted, vacated, and remanded by the Supreme Court back down to the DC Circuit Court for reevaluation and re-review by the DC Court in light of what the Supreme Court said in their 6-3 Cargill decision. So that's good news. You have a case being remanded back down to the lower court to correct what they said in light of what the Supreme Court said in Cargill. Now, one of the other cases that was in fact also pending in front of the Supreme Court that came out of a bump stock case, that was the Hardin case. That case was out of the Sixth Circuit. Now, in the order list, the Supreme Court simply just denied review and just denied any action on that case. And that's primarily because the Hardin case in the Sixth Circuit was ruled in favor of the Pro 2A side. That decision in the Sixth Circuit went against the ATF and struck down the bump stock ban. And so simply the Supreme Court decided just to take no action on that and just leave the Sixth Circuit decision in place. So again, some good news. I was expecting that they would also GVR the Sixth Circuit case just for maybe some slight corrections in light of what they said in Cargill, but they just simply decided not to do anything. Now, the other cases that were pending that went to that same conference that did not appear on this week's order list were all of those Illinois cases dealing with the Protect Illinois Communities Act, or PICA. And again, that's the state's rifle and magazine ban. Now, if you're curious of what those cases are, those are all the NAGR versus Naperville cases, the Harrell versus Raoul case, the Barnett versus Raoul case, the GOA versus Raoul case, the Langley versus Kelly case, and then the Herrera versus Raoul case. Those are all the cases that were pending in front of the Supreme Court, asking for early intervention in those lawsuits on an interlocutory basis to essentially strike down the state of Illinois and their statewide rifle and magazine ban. Those cases were sent to the Supreme Court for conference. Those are on cert petitions for reviews, and they've been relisted about like 5 or 6 times now. And again, on this order list, after being relisted last week, we got no news. The likelihood is, again, they are going to be relisted for a future conference and probably are going to be reviewed on a cleanup conference, and Supreme Court will decide what they want to do with them at that time. Now, a lot of people are scratching their head about what is going on with these cases, primarily because these cases were also tracking with another case, which was the Bianchi versus Brown case, or the Bianchi versus Frosch case, and that deals with Maryland's ban on so-called assault weapons. The Maryland ban case was a little bit different because it was on a final merits decision. That Bianchi case was also GVR'd after Bruen, so back in 2022, Bianchi was GVR'd, and the court there in the Fourth Circuit has not properly addressed Bianchi. It's still moving towards a final merits decision. It's also been reviewed by the Fourth Circuit en banc panel, and we're currently waiting for a decision. But that case went to conference with all these Illinois cases, and of all the cases that we thought they primarily might grant review to, it was going to be the Bianchi case. But the Supreme Court decided a while back to kick the Bianchi case back down to the Fourth Circuit, but then they had all of these interlocutory cases out of Illinois that have not been GVR'd before, have not been addressed before, that are in a worse posture. The Supreme Court has kept these ones hanging around. And a lot of people originally were speculating, well, maybe that's because there's going to be some sort of language in the Rahimi case that's going to impact maybe some of these issues. But then last week, we got the Rahimi decision, which was an 8-1 decision, which ultimately upheld the federal domestic violence restraining order restrictions on 2A rights. And there was no overarching or blatant language in the Rahimi decision that stuck out that said, of course, this is going to apply to rifle bans and magazine bans. There was no big language in there that you could point to saying, well, this is why the Supreme Court held all those Illinois cases. And we were expecting maybe to get some news this week, but again, these rifle ban cases have been relisted. What's probably going to happen here, or what I would suspect is going to happen here, is that these Illinois cases are simply going to be denied on review when it comes to the cleanup conferences. Maybe the Supreme Court is just kicking this down the road. It was just kicking it to the very end because they didn't want to keep having to address this all term, because these cases have already been to them multiple times in the past. So maybe they're just trying to buy as much time to kick these, or maybe there's going to be a denial with a few dissents, and the Supreme Court is just pushing this to the latest period so they can write their dissents. And, they are still trying to write some final opinions on cases they've actually reviewed and are actually needing to issue decisions on. So maybe they're just kind of kicking their homework down the road to address some of these dissents on denials of these Illinois cases. Now, these Illinois rifle magazine ban cases are very interesting because all of these cases were recently denied review by the Seventh Circuit en banc panel. The Seventh Circuit en banc panel did not want to address any of these cases, and that was even after the Seventh Circuit there, a 3-judge panel, used the incorrect type of Second Amendment analysis. Now, they came to their decision using an analysis that is not in line at all with Heller and the common use test, or even the recent Bruin holding. Instead, the Seventh Circuit used the military use test. Also very interesting with all these Illinois cases is the hardline approach that the state of Illinois has taken, that these types of common AR-15s and AKs, all these semi-automatic rifles, that they are not arms at all, and therefore they fall outside the protection of the Second Amendment. They argue that these are dangerous and unusual weapons, that these are dangerous and unusual items, and therefore the state can regulate them however they want. And keep in mind, all these cases in the past have had no issue being denied by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has denied emergency review multiple times in these cases. They've kicked these cases multiple times on motions for judgments on the pleadings, and they've kicked other similar issues in similar cases like the Bianchi case. So it's very curious about why these keep getting relisted and pushed back and forth, especially even after Rahimi, when we see there was nothing big in that decision that would impact all these Illinois cases. So one of the things we're going to be keeping a very close eye on in the upcoming couple weeks is what the Supreme Court is actually going to do in these Illinois cases. I would suspect that there's just simply going to be a cleanup denial and maybe some dissents, but hopefully I'm wrong, and I really hope the Supreme Court does take up these cases, because I think that would also go a long way to cure up some of the issues that I have with the Rahimi decision, that maybe the courts and some of these lower courts are going to abuse, especially some of the dicta and some of the unfortunate language that was included in the Rahimi decision. So I hope the Supreme Court takes up these Illinois rifle magazine ban cases, because again, selfishly, as someone in California who lives under these rifle magazine bans, it would be critical and very important for the Supreme Court to address this issue. So again, that is kind of my hopeful perspective, but really anyone's guess is good right now, especially because Rahimi didn't give us a lot of answers on some of these issues, and the Supreme Court is being very mysterious about relisting all these cases, putting some cases on hold, GVRing one, not GVRing the other. So again, we're going to be keeping our eyes closely on what happens in the upcoming weeks, and as we get more information, I will let you guys know. So if you guys like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.